Hi, everybody. Welcome back to FLF. This is episode 14. And today, me and the boys are talking about the Bell Witch. John,
Ah,
Fourth
how about
time
you
is the
tell us?
charm.
Yes, we have been having some fun times recording this episode so far tonight. So, John,
All
the floor
right.
is yours.
So, in Adams, Tennessee, the Bell family became wrapped into what is known as the first American ghost story. So, it all began sometime in 1817. John Bell was a local farmer who lived the average life for Americana at the time. He was a man with 6 children, and he was doing his best to provide for his family. That all changed one day in this early 19th century farmhouse. He was outside, wrapped up in his daily routine, when he encountered what is described as a giant dog like creature with a rabbit's head. Because, of course, it did.
rabbit's head.
Right? I mean, that's a lot of these stories in Tennessee seem to start are wrapped around a dog encounter, a dog man, wolves, and different things like that. And from what I was reading, so the dog man is a Native American legend.
Yeah.
Apparently, the chiefs or the shamans or the medicine men of the tribes, when they're vengeful, they transform into a dog-like creature, and which a lot of this has to do with land disputes and things like that. And to be honest, this is during the time when it was an early budding America still, and really what rightfully was their land.
Yeah, because we're talking in 1817. I know that Lewis and Clark had done their trip all the way to the Pacific, but we're talking that area in Tennessee was still kind of the frontier itself. I know
Absolutely.
that what was it, the French and Indian War? They decided that everything west of the Appalachians was supposed to not be touched by the colonies, excuse me. But eventually we broke that when we found out about the Cumberland Gap, and we're like, hey boys, there's a hole in these mountains, we can get over here. And so that area is was a company, it was the Transylvania Purchase, and they call it the Transylvania County, which foreshadowing if you ask me. But yeah, go ahead, John. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, it was an interesting time back in the day because, like, 1804 ish, that's when they did the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, this is, and the family had moved from Edgecombe, North Carolina, to Tennessee around that time frame too. So, I mean, there's definitely some hostile, some bad blood floating around in the air in
Well,
that time frame.
you had the Native Americans that had the land, and they were also dealing with very feisty Frenchmen that were fur traders. So it's just a big recipe for disaster, if you ask me.
Well, the way I look at it is like, we had these young settlers, they're out in the frontiers, they're trying to find their piece of the American pie. But the country was kind of divided because on one side you have the plantation owning pre-Civil War farm boys, and on the other side you had the lawlessness of the Wild West. I mean, but peppered all throughout, you have the Native Americans who felt like they were absolutely entitled to this land that they had lived in for years.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, if you rewind if you rewind the clock back a little bit, even with the Roanoke settlement, they were trying to be fair and civil, like most of the tribes were with these English settlers, and they were coming over, and we just kept on stepping our boundaries or overstepping the boundaries set. And I could kind of see where the animosity would come from, because it's like every early promise, every charter that we wrote, we ended up breaking. It seems like.
well, you got them. They come over here. They needed the Native Americans to get those first cold winters and help them out. They feed them, they clothe them, they show them their hunting spots. Then they bring guns over in boats and take over. So Anyways, Dogmen. So he encountered what he described was a giant dog-like creature with a rabbit's head. And I'm sure the first thing he did was checked his water bottle or canteen to make sure that it didn't have the old white lightning in it, if you know what I mean. At least that's what I would have done. Anyways, when he
Right.
finally convinced himself that alcohol had nothing to do with the abomination he was trying his best to probably run from and or understand what it was exactly that he was looking at, because to him it was like some kind of Jack Russell Terrifier that was exactly too much at that moment.
Jack Russell Terrifier.
That's amazing.
But anyway, shortly afterwards, his daughter Betsy also, she described seeing what she said was a little girl in a dress that was hanging from a tree. And I was wondering, it reminds me of that movie, The Sixth Sense. You know what I'm talking about? Like in that movie, it always showed like dead people didn't realize they were dead, but they were like in the state of when they died.
Oh yeah,
Really?
dude, that's yeah, death amnesia in that movie was real.
Right. I mean, is that what it is? Like, is residual hauntings? Is that you're just going to relive the worst day of your life over and over and over for eternity?
God, I hope not.
It depends on how the week was before, I guess. Because some people it's probably the best day. um
It
now
makes me think of the movie The Ghostbusters whenever they come across the ghost that's like flipping through the index.
oh yeah, dude, or the taxi driver. Like that's just terrible. Like yeah, I don't know. Like there's somebody who like died while they were pretending to be a sassy New Yorker who was Italian who was serving a prince somewhere. Yeah, and they have to spend the rest of their life pretending to be a sassy, like you know what I mean, like a hairstylist or whatever, and some bad movie that shows up on Hallmark Channel.
and,
Um,
and go ahead, Richard.
well, I wanted to talk about the first encounter while we're here. So I know in the various retellings of this, it's it comes back to some type of weird animal, right? I know in probably the freakiest version of it that I read, he saw the animal, whatever it was. It had these real bizarre, eerie eyes, and it was staring
Mhm.
at him, and he shot at it.
Yeah,
And
he felt like it was staring at him like a person would stare at him, like it making eye contact.
well, I know the probably the freakiest version that I read and all that was like instead of it like running off or something like that, it like began to fade, like it became transparent and disappeared. And then, excuse me, I think it was like within a week, 3 or 4 days, something like that, like a giant bird showed
A
up.
turkey.
Yeah,
Right.
well, he didn't know it was the largest bird he'd ever seen.
Uh,
And as it had the same eyes that the other animal had, and as it flew over him, he said to have like felt a chill down to his bone.
mhm.
And with this story in particular, like that's a very ominous way to enter, especially when you start looking at like black rabbits or goats, you know, those weird hybrid animals, because that's where you see a lot of early witch folklore. Like
Mhm.
that's usually a sign that somebody's made a covenant with the devil. That animal
Yeah.
shows up, and there's actually a wonderful movie called Witches or Witch, I believe,
Mhm.
where it talks about, or the movie is about a young girl who, you know, spoiler, becomes a witch, and there's some pretty creepy animals in that one too.
Really?
And that's like old school, like what farmers in Britain were scared of witch story, not like, you know, hocus pocus where you got some crazy old ladies who were, you know, obsessed with being young flying on, you know, vacuums or some shit. But that
Well,
movie's worth a watch.
when I was doing my research, I ran across, so I guess in Michigan in Wexford County, there is a group of lumberjacks that say the Native Americans there describe the dogman as a 7-foot tall dog, half man creature that stands on two legs with gray or black hair, amber eyes, and human-like vocalizations. And apparently, according to the Native American legends, it reappears every 10 years in years that end with 7. And if you notice, and all of this began in 1817. So it kind of fits with the Dogman lore as far as the beginning of it.
Now,
Yeah.
real quick, shout out to Brandon over at Tinfoil Tales. Do you
Yeah.
remember? I mean, he told it the Michigan dog man. You're talking about Michigan, lumberjacks or whatever. Do you remember when he said he had his encounter? Was that 2006 or was that 2007?
Oh man. Well, I'm
Get
will.
back to us about that one.
Yeah, I'll reach out and we'll have update next episode.
Wouldn't
on
that
that
be
one.
some shit, man? But everything that I read, let's see, I actually pulled it up and it said 1957, 1937, 1967, and 1957 were all major encounters in that area.
Interesting.
1887 was the first reported sighting of the Dogman in America.
So they've got kind of like they're on clockwork here. They're like the cicadas kind of coming out of the ground or the doghouse, I guess, and spooking some people.
Or the creeper from, like
Yeah.
they're on a
Just
10-year cycle.
When the red moon is hanging high, he attacks Justin Long. That poor bastard.
One of my favorite memes.
So I
Okay.
just fact checked this. Brandon had his encounter in 2007.
Wow.
So
Ba-da-da.
insert ominous music.
We don't have the soundboard yet.
Yeah, well, we'll have $5 eventually.
Yeah.
That's
Give
something
me
we'll
money.
bring him back on and kind of bring this up to him eventually.
No, right?
Yeah, he's a good guy. I haven't talked to him in a little bit. So what? So you saw the version where it was like something like a dog with a rabbit's head. Dan, did you see anything weird? And because I mean, there's so many different versions of this story. Granted, a lot of it comes back to the same source material, but like.
So when I was reading into it, it was saying a dog-like creature, like a dog wolf. I didn't hear anything about the rabbit's head. I've heard that in other lore, but it said that he was spooked by the way that it almost entranced him with the way it was looking at him, and he shot at it, and like you said, it either faded or it took off. And they went to look to find some kind of bedding to where it laid down and died or something like that. Because according to him, it was a direct hit when he shot it. And it disappeared completely. They couldn't find it at all. And then, like you said, later on, they had instances with other animals too. That's what I read into.
I will say that if his name was Billy Ray, I would believe he hit it. But since this is just some rich asshole, I don't believe he shot and hit it. So
right. So, and also like I can't remember if we mentioned it in this take of this episode. Earlier we were talking about how like this is right at the beginning of the Victorian era, right? And so you got
so the
people.
Victorian era picks up. I'm sorry, go ahead. That's a weird literary thing. I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, you got a lot of people that are starting to get into spirituality, into the occult, and really trying to channel ghosts and trying to speak with the supernatural. So, yeah,
Well,
I mean,
so
like,
pop culture wise, so this is right in the prime of early era Gothic novels, Gothic short stories, and things like that. So in 1764, the castle of, I always want to say Ontario, but it's not Ontario, Castle Ontario or something. I can't pronounce it. That was the first Gothic short story to come out. And then, so the time frame in which John's talking about 1817 time frame, that's
Mhm.
when Frankenstein was released by Mary Shelley.
Mm.
And that's one of those things that did sweep across, that crossed the pond and came into American lore. People were freaked out. This is also at the tail end of the scientific revolution. So there was
Mhm.
a lot of scientific advancements that happened in the 1700s. And anytime there's an era like that, there's also that like reactionary Christian pushback or religious pushback in general.
Mhm.
So people not spreading news of, like, people not necessarily reading the Gothic literature, but just going around saying, hey, this is the devil's work, seems to spread a lot of that information. And having been an edgy teenager, if Miss Sarah Bell is telling me that if I read a scary book, I'm going to hell, I'm probably going to read a scary book just to scare other people.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and especially
That's why.
among the Bell family, because they are wealthy, they are landowners, they are literate, which is a very, very rare thing back in the day.
Yeah.
That's true.
But yeah, definitely rebellion. I mean, that's why a lot of kids that I knew even listen to Hollywood Undead, is because people are like, that's the devil's music. And that's the only reason I would listen. The only reason I'd listen to him is
Hollywood
someone told me
Undead.
not to, and then I would not listen to him. But you were talking about the instance where she saw a little girl. I did some research, and I guess there was another instance. Like, it started affecting John at first, but then it spread throughout the family, getting affected. There was a time, I don't know which daughter it was, she was on a swing set, and they said that she told them that there was a little girl that was next to her on the swing set that she was trying to talk to, but not only would she not say anything, she would not, like, she wasn't even acknowledging she was getting talked to. She was just looking down on, like, as she was on the swing set. And I guess the little girl could see her, but no one else could see the manifestation that she was claiming. And that happens too. A couple of, like, later on, some of the other instances where, like, some parts of the family see it, and other parts of the family, they don't necessarily see the entity, but they see the kind of what's happening around.
Well, so
That was also Betsy, because
Betsy?
I think it's important to kind of lay the players in this game. So we have John Bell, right? That's the patriarch of the family. He's one of the main characters in the story. There's his wife Lucy, and they have three boys. Richard Williams, shout out to Richard, but he goes by Williams, so maybe not so much. And we have
what a dick.
Drury, I believe, but it goes by Drew. We have Betsy, and then there's six kids, but those are the kind of
Esther.
the main ones that are right there. There's Esther.
Well, every 1800s family had a Betsy.
It's definitely
nobody I've ever met named Betsy was less than 100 years old.
Right. And see, I
knew about consumption.
I knew about Esther because I looked into that one, the story about that as well. What would happen with her?
The mother, you said her name was Lucy?
Yes, Lucy.
She's the one out of the whole family that had the most pleasant of the encounters, or the least violent of the encounters, you could say.
Dude, the Bell Witch was 100% Team Lucy. 100%
right.
Team Lucy.
Right.
So while everyone else was getting, like, beat up, relentlessly mocked, like, this Bell Witch, I mean, we'll kind of get into some of it.
Actually, Lucy, I made a short list. It said ripping the blankets off them at night, knocking on the floors and walls, banging around the house at all hours of night, scratching, poking, biting, and slapping the children. And it stabbed Betsy with sewing pins because fuck Betsy.
oh,
Straight up.
oh, it gets better for actually gets worse for Betsy.
Oh yeah.
So in one instance, let me pull up my notes real quick so I get this right. So in one instance, her brother writes about so so he describes in detail how the witch would physically abuse them, and this is some of this information to come from a book by Sarah Seabar and from William Bell himself. It's like the witch began to slap the children,
Mhm.
especially when they tried to get their blankets back. And then one night it attacked William Bell. The witch hit him in his head very hard. He felt as if his head was going to be ripped off.
Dang.
Uh, Bell describes another instant, and this is William Bell's words himself. He says, "The blows were heard distinctly, like the open palm of a very heavy hand, while the sting was keenly felt. It did not neglect to pull my hair."
Jeez.
Now, that's like the little stuff. So
Yeah.
in one instance, like Betsy's needles and pins, so the doctor like tries to give her some medicine, and she throws up like this thick, nasty shit, and it's full of needles and pins.
Oh no.
Oh.
William describes this as the witch choosing Betsy as a shining mark for her exhibition of wicked stratagem and devilish torture. When Betsy threw up, the witch started laughing hysterically, and it freaked the doctor out.
I know that there was one instance where they missed church and the witch started reciting the book of Matthew to them and calling them heathens for missing church.
So that's an interesting element in this as well. So as the haunting starts, right? So it starts off small, like there you hear
Yeah.
the scratching, the
They
knocking,
think it's a
things
rat.
start moving. Yeah, like the cover starts getting pulled down a little bit, like it's like pervert, you know what I mean? Like just being some weird shit.
Mhm.
And then it's like it's almost like this entity started feeding off the fear, or they started like, hey, what's going on? And it started getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And they eventually called their neighbor in, and the neighbor's James Johnson. Let me check his name real quick. So there were a couple of different versions of the Johnson guy. So in some of the sources, he was labeled as a preacher. In some of the other sources, like they don't mention him being a preacher at all. Just he's just a very religious person. Um,
Mhm.
he would come over and he started praying, and the uh, the witch would pray back. And now,
Yeah.
like on the surface, this seems odd because like at most pop culture, like these things tend to freak out when they hear a prayer. Like when you think of like a possession or a haunting, Linda Blair's head flipping around and violently throwing up, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, you're praying, so what? Your God doesn't live here, you know what I mean? But if you're familiar with like some of the biblical teaching, like the devil isn't just out doing weird shit to make people suffer. Like he's usually acting with God's permission, trying to test somebody.
Mhm.
So it stands to reason that since this seemingly evil force would have predated the Bible, like if it's coming from the devil, like why would the Bible have like why would those words have any impact on this creature?
Right.
And it said that when there was Johnson, and then there's also like a preacher, Reverend Gunn, and he would have intellectual biblical arguments with the witch, and oftentimes the witch would know the Bible better and would be
Really?
able to carry on a conversation. Yes, so it's a really interesting witch, man. Like so
Yeah.
the hauntings happen, and the origin behind it's kind of muddy. So like the general running theme behind it all is this witch started haunting John Bell over a land dispute,
Right.
and one telling, like I think in the movie they talked about how um he was using like I guess that she lent the Bell family some land and they took care of it and she didn't pay them back or something like that. And so they just took it. And so the movie paints it out to where Kate Batts, which is where the supposed witch who cast the spell on the Bell family, was pretty pissed off about that. And so she
Yeah.
summoned the devil to haunt them.
In fact, like
Um,
the name that they gave it was Kate. It is simply
yes.
Kate. Like the celebrities nowadays that have like just one name, like Madonna
The,
and stuff, is just
the
Kate.
witch
She's the
formerly known
first.
as Kate.
Yeah.
So this witch starts haunting them, right? And they start asking. They eventually get to the point where they can communicate. They start talking with it, and the witch tells them that like all kinds of weird stuff. Like it says, where's it at? I'm sorry, I wrote this stuff down. Do, 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 do. I'm sorry, awkward pause. Where is John?
No,
John,
it's
okay.
yeah, he's
Okay.
around.
So in one, so throughout the conversation with this witch, so I feel like we're kind of getting off topic here. So the witch shows up, starts haunting them, starts torturing John, starts torturing Betsy, starts messing with the other kids. They eventually they want to keep it secret. They eventually bring in a preacher, talking to him, and then word starts to spread around town. Like so, they start inviting other townspeople over to experience
Yeah,
the situation.
that's something too, is like the town was actually very supportive of the Bell family and they wanted to do whatever
Yes.
they could. And they got to the point like where it spread that the artist known as Kate, the scare artist known as Kate, was involved. The town kind of turned negative towards Kate Betts to where she was like, I have nothing to do with this. Like, I'm not responsible for this at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
And the Bats family is probably the ones that suffered the most in the situation because their reputation was spoiled that way. Now, Kate Batts, she in one of the documentaries I watched about this, a descendant of the Bell family starts to investigate the witch himself, and he goes back to Adams, Tennessee, or Red River, Tennessee. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And he
Adams.
and Adams, Tennessee. Yeah, so he and the team of research, air quotes researchers, start looking at like old property records and things like that. And what they find is the Bats and the Bell family actually served together in the Tennessee militia.
Oh.
Uh, Kate Batts, his name is signed on a land deed. I guess she bought like 860 plus acres.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty rare for a woman to have done that, and then for a woman to be able to sign her name is even this just talks about the time in which they were living. Now there were no court records to suggest that a land deal between the two had ever happened. What I do know is that Kate Bell. I'm sorry, Kate Batts' husband was, I guess, paralyzed or like permanently sick. I couldn't really tell. I read through one of the Bell's diaries, and I believe the term he used was intermed. So I don't know. That's old person talk for almost dead. So she was a strong, independent woman, and in the that actually the A&E documentary I was watching called Cursed, the guy talks to a couple of old timers in Adams, Tennessee, and they're like, "Well, you can tell who's a Bats kid because they're fiercely independent, just like Kate was." So
Mhm.
there's
Well,
that. Go
you
ahead.
called it Red. You called it Adams. You called it Red. It is the same area. Adams is on the Red River, and I believe that they are on the Red River because we're from that area. And so, like, the
Yes.
Red River comes and goes around and goes up towards where we're from, which is like Clarksville area, which it also was areas that were built on Native American burial grounds. And there's been some things out there, like we'll talk about later on. So it's not just Adams alone that's had like these little issues with the supernatural. Like that whole area has been a hotbed. Like you heard with one of our previous guests when he heard, like we said, yeah, we're from that area, and it's like, oh, well, no wonder you've dealt with all that kind of crazy shit.
Yeah, right. Well, so the accusation that it's Kate's Bats, which comes a little bit later. So the way it comes out is, so like these people who are visiting the Bell family, I mean, because it's almost like a tourist destination, because back in the 1800s you didn't have shit else to do. You risk dysentery to go check out a weird story, right?
Right.
You'd hop in your log, your wagon, and hope for the best. You don't get robbed along the way.
Hop on your log and head on out of town.
From everything that I learned, it had every phase of what classifies as a poltergeist haunting. And if you don't mind, I would like to read these phases real quick.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So stage 1 are the beginnings. And the activity usually begins with faintly registered noises, scratching sounds, things like that. It's usually disregarded as like rodents or water pipes, or, you try to explain away the noises. Stage 2 is when the sounds become harder to ignore. At this point, they resemble knuckles knocking, objects such as glass, maybe, and sometimes very loud crackling or unexplained banging noises. Stage 3 is the hardest to ignore, and that's when things start moving around. I call that the gaslighting stage, because for some reason ghosts just love to gaslight people. Like, damn, where did I put my keys? I know I set them down here, and really,
one thing about the Bell Witch, complete asshole.
Absolutely.
Complete asshole. Does all kinds of weird shit. Not just evil stuff, like just mean, petty shit too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, talking about gaslighting, before we get you, like the Poltergeist movie, there's a iconic scene where the lady's making toast and she turns around and then like all the chairs are sitting on the table. Right. I remember thinking as a kid, like, no fucking way. I'm leaving. There's no way I'm in that house anymore. Like, there's someone I can call someone to come. Like, hey, man, they just crash tonight.
Yeah, no doubt.
So to continue on, stage 4 is the apport stage. It's where things teleport and disapport into existence. And that's what that means, is like something appearing out of nowhere that's not supposed to be there and then disappearing before you can really comprehend what you've seen. Stage 5, the communication stage. This is usually where people start saying, okay, this thing is trying to communicate with us, which this is also what I call the manifestation stage. At this point in time, if you're trying to communicate with something, you should realize that whatever this is, it is probably not good. And a lot of people will be like, okay, well, I'm going to say 2 knocks is yes, 1 knock is no. And they start asking questions, or even they get a Ouija board at this point in time. But when you communicate with these spirits, that's when it starts manifesting. That's when it starts growling and whistling and muttering. That's when you start hearing voices. That's like trying to invite this thing into more of a physical realm. And that is something that a lot of people in these situations, that's the mistake that they make, because now you've invited it into your home. And anything I've learned with ghouls and ghosts and vampires, like, you do not invite them into your home. You know what I mean?
Especially ghouls, dude.
Right?
Ghouls are dicks.
Right. Yeah. Stage 6 is the climax stage. This is when the poltergeist activity will suddenly increase to a point that it had never reached before. I read a story about these people that came home and their house was on fire. In all they looked through the windows, they were seeing fire, and they run inside the house and everything is fine. this is when things just come to a head, and there's no sleep at this point in time. It keeps you up at all hours of the night.
It causes people to really start losing their mind. I'm going to give a little foreshadowing in one of our future episodes. There's a guy we've been researching that reached the climax stage, and he literally asks his preacher if there's a type of bullet he can buy to shoot his ghost that's bothering him.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because Andrew Jackson, one of our greatest American presidents,
Mr. I'm going to do two duels before breakfast.
Right. Mr. I got shot in a duel because my gun misfired. I went ahead, unpacked my gun, reloaded it, took a hit off my pipe, and then shot the other man down, Jackson. But anyways, he decided at one point in time he was going to visit the Bell Manor. And that's a whole funny story in itself, which we're going to get to in a little bit. If you guys don't mind, I would love to get into that.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
I'm all down to have a little AJ action.
Oh, yeah.
But stages 7 and 8 are the decline and the endings, which is where things just sort of like slow back down, and they kind of taper off for a spell, and then the whole cycle starts over again. But those are the 8 stages to a poltergeist haunting.
Okay, that's really good information. I did not know that.
Yeah,
I think
stage 5 is the one you want to avoid. Do not try to communicate, because 9 times out of 10, what you are inviting into your house is not. It's not good. Nobody good haunts this world.
I mean, I don't even invite people. So, like, the last thing I want to do is invite something supernatural over.
I mean, if you're already gaslighting me, like, what makes me think that you're going to be, this will be the good ghost,
Yeah, this time it'll be different.
Right.
Yeah, only an asshole would hide your keys.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk to that person anyway. Now, so you bringing this up, I think that, so stage 1, stage 2, that's when he sees he just, unluckily sees this monster rabbit hybrid thing that just kind of stares at him and fades away. And then he starts seeing, the Betsy sees a little girl, or Esther sees a little girl, whatever, whoever. And then we start, that's when we start getting the scratching on the walls. That's when we start hearing the knockings. This is when, the bed started moving a little bit. Start getting into stage 3, stage 4. Now, stage 5. So
that was teleport or dissipate, wasn't it?
Yeah. So what on earth, is like, what's missing from a Bell family? Like, there's 8 kids. Like, I don't know how that ghost is making things move, or 6 kids, whatever it is. Like, those poor kids are getting their asses beat because the ghost is
did y'all look into how Esther got traumatized?
No, I didn't. Now, where does that fall in? Tell me.
So one day she was going to the hen house to get some eggs, and she's walking along the path, because I guess, like, it's you like you said, like, I think it was a total of like 1,000 acres is what the purchase was for the whole manor.
Oh, but yeah, they were definitely big time landowners.
So there's a pathway that she's walking, and she encounters a girl with black hair and with a dress on, and she's facing away from her, and she's just like, "Hey, lady, can I help you?" And not acknowledging her or anything like that. So she starts walking closer, and as she's walking closer, this being starts combing her hands through her hair, and it draws her attention, and she would stop, and the combing of the hair would stop, and then
Is
she'd
it
start
combing
approaching.
through Esther's hair?
No, it's the I should have
Through
made that
its
more
hair.
clear.
Okay.
Through its hair. And as she's walking along, like she decides, like every time she starts taking a step towards, which I should have also mentioned, the being or the entity is in between her and the hen house. So she's trying to just be like, whatever, do your thing. And as she starts trying to walk towards the hen house, the thing starts approaching her and then picks up, pulling on her hair or pulling through the hair. Then she starts trying to backpedal a little bit. That thing starts coming towards her, and she realizes, okay, this thing's coming after me. She starts trying to run. Not only does that thing start picking up its pace coming towards her, it's no longer just brushing through its hair. It's just yanking hair off of its
No,
head.
thank you.
And it's every time she picks up the pace, it just pulls clumps of hair out faster and faster. And the hair is just laying all over the place. So she hops the fence and she's trying to get back towards the house. And all of a sudden, the being hops a fence, and 3 little children dressed in like white, like gowns appear, and they jump up
fell
into
out of her hoop skirt or something.
yeah, right.
Oh.
And of course, she's got clumps of just patches of hair at this point. The little girls and the entity, I guess, well, they're all entities. They climb into trees, and they start violently shaking the trees back and forth. Well, at this point in time, Esther realizes that I guess it was her husband was by the door, and she starts calling for him, like, you need to see what's going on out here. And he comes and he goes up to the door. He can't see what's going on, or the window, I mean. He can't see what's going on. He can only see the trees violently shaking back and forth. And he's just like, what in the hell is that? Because it's not matching how the wind's blowing or anything like that. These trees are just shaking violently back and forth. And Esther can see it, but he can't. So, like, yeah, and so, like, that's kind of an instance of what you're talking about with stage, I believe it was what you said, stage 5. So it appeared, and then she could see it, he couldn't. And on top of that, like, after they're all freaked the hell out, it just disappears and stops.
No, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Right?
terrifying. If I watching that happen, it's absolutely horrifying. And I think probably the scariest detail in there is the fact that this ghost took the time to jump the fence instead of just run through it.
Right?
Like that's like, okay, now this isn't a ghost. This is real. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those details. Obviously, who knows what the fuck happened, right? But
Yeah.
I know
if
when they reached the communication stage and the ghosts had already skipped way past the knocking stage, and in a voice it answered them feebly, I am a spirit. I once was very happy, but now I've been disturbed. And from what Dan is saying, that thing wasn't the only thing disturbed. It disturbed everything around them.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
very disturbing.
it's disturbing
I'm
nature,
disturbed
too.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed that detail. I don't know how I missed that. I read a lot of stuff, but so they bring in this Johnson guy, right? Just kind of get back to where we were before John came back in. So he starts talking to these people, and there's also a Reverend Gunn who comes in and starts talking about us all this stuff. And so over the course of like, I guess at this point, a couple of years, like all these tourists are there. They're all trying to figure out what this thing is and why it's there. And so like the witch would carry on like real conversations with people. And like you said, I was once disturbed. So the witch also claimed to have been a rich immigrant who died. And then he said that it was there specifically so that whoever, one of the sons, would find its buried treasure. Well, gave him detailed directions like, hey, find the big rock, dig to the left. Total bullshit. So this,
Oh, absolutely.
these,
Yet another instance of gaslighting.
these rich white kids who own slaves went out to dig up a treasure that didn't exist. It's probably the first time they picked up a shovel their entire life.
Oh,
One
while
instance,
we're talking about the slaves, one of the slaves that lived on the plantation, who was one of the people on the farm that was traumatized by the witch. He actually made what they call a
witch ball.
a witch's ball, which if you guys don't know is it's a blue glass ornament. It's a hollow glass ball that is made to trap the spirit inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And with this being around Christmas time, fun fact, that is why we hang ornaments on the tree at Christmas time. So that way it traps the evil spirits, and all we can do is celebrate the good in the world.
Yep. I think some of that goes back to Gullah culture. That's why they would paint their porches blue, is because it would ward off evil spirits. And on top of not only making blue glass balls, they would just have glass bottles they would decorate on trees outside, and not only just around Christmas time, because they believed those evil spirits and things like that would get trapped in those bottles and not be allowed to go into the houses. People still do that to this day. If you ever happen to notice people with blue glass bottles on a tree in their yard, that's what they're doing.
To be fair,
that was just trashy, like Southern decor.
To be fair, ghosts weren't the only thing getting trapped in those blue bottles, if you know what I mean, at that time.
and we're talking about trashy redneck decor. I mean, we used to use, or my grandparents used to use toilets as plant pots. So I know all about that.
I actually heard a great bottle joke earlier. Why does Dr. Pepper come in a bottle? Because his wife died.
All right.
Yeah,
that was a nice little break in the scary there.
Yeah. So
yeah, that was a good one.
One of the other one was the witch claimed to have been a dead person whose grave was disturbed, and that it was looking for its missing tooth somewhere on the property.
That reminds me of that scary story that we read when we were kids. You know, I'm talking about the book with the horrifying illustrations in it.
It's like the gold, the one with the guy was after his gold or something like that, right?
No, it was a lady and she was looking for her missing toe.
No,
I kind of vaguely remember that one.
Have you seen
That's another thing too that they talk about. The whole reason that spirits happen in the first place is they have a connection. Either they have a connection to something that you have and you need to get rid of it, or they need to be buried properly. And until they are, their remains or whatever, they're just going to keep on causing a damn scene. Which to this, it sounds like it must have been the land itself, the land gone sour, if you know, kind of quoting Herman Munster from Pet Sematary.
That's a great quote. Now, what do you think is scarier, old lady toes or old lady ghost?
Like real old lady toes?
Yeah.
Is the whole old lady connected to it?
Dealer's choice. I'm going toes, dude. I'd rather have an old lady ghost, man. Like, sure, she's not baking cookies, but maybe she will. Like, ghost cookies. Maybe it'll smell like cookies in my house every once in a while. Because I know in one instance, the witch supposedly got shithouse drunk on some moonshine, and the house just smelled like liquor for a long time.
I don't feel like the witch was the only person getting drunk on moonshine at this time.
No, there's some weird claims that I came across. So, but where the Kate Batts thing comes from. So, eventually after like pressing, I guess they couldn't find the tooth anywhere. So they kind of gave up on that. And then someone kept pressing, well, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And then the witch said, I am no more nor less than old Kate Batts' witch, and I am determined to haunt old Jack Bell as long as he lives. Now, Kate Batts was still alive. Actually lived 22 years longer.
You must really hate somebody if you're going to haunt them while you're still alive.
Dude, 100%, right? so that's where the Kate came from. So I will say that it's important to note that Williams Bell. So where a lot of he published as well, he along with someone else published his diary that, and well, I shouldn't say a diary, it was his notes. He wrote about it 40 years, like 30 or 40 years after this happened, right? And so he's writing from memory as a kid. So who knows what's real, what's not real there. But he made sure to point out that it really wasn't fair that Kate Batts was pegged as the witch or as the person casting it, because she was, here is this lady who was heading up a household back when, like, she was a strong independent woman and she wasn't allowed to do a lot of things because she was a woman, but here she is
Right.
making it happen, right? Even though her husband's sick and stuff like that. Really, it's tragic that happened, but it stuck. That's a great
Yeah.
story. I mean, back, if you got to figure in 1800s, being a strong, independent woman was enough to get you burned at a stake
Oh
on the
yeah.
wrong Wednesday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you weren't already settled and married by like 11, you were considered an outcast back then for a woman.
Well, that's where some of the Betsy problem comes into play. So Betsy, when all this was going on, she was between 13 and 16. We'll
Mhm.
say 15, just kind of, pick a number there. Now, from what it's been described, she grew up into quite a good-looking young woman, and she was drawing a lot of attention from a lot of the boys. Now, she did have a specific, like, there was one boy in particular that the families, like, hey, this is a good match. The two liked each other. Kid named Joshua, I believe Porter, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the Bell Witch absolutely fucking hated this dude.
Couldn't
Absolutely
stand him.
hated this dude. Couldn't stand him. Was like fucking with, like, she. I don't think there was any stories of the witch fucking with him, but every time he was around, like Betsy was getting her hair pulled, like it was really acting a fool, which kind of makes into this big like mind fuck, right? So you have all these tourists coming in, they're talking to this thing, and then like they're just beating the shit. It's just watching this girl get her ass beat. You know what I mean? By like some invisible thing. That's got to be torturous, right? Well, one of the people that was interested in Betsy was her teacher. I don't recall his
Yikes.
name. Yeah, it was real creepy. It was just the schoolhouse teacher.
Old
Last name was
habits never
Powell,
change.
and what I think she ended up marrying him. I was kind of like I felt like that was
Well, I
somehow
know
involved.
that as far as the first suitor, his name was Joshua. Um,
Yeah, it might
the
have been
witch
Joshua.
straight
It
up said,
also might have been
"You're
Josiah.
not going to marry him." Straight up,
Yeah.
that was one of the things that it actually vocalized was like, "I will never let you marry this man."
So
She did not want to see Betsy happy at all.
that was one of the big stories there. So like and contrasting to that, and this is all kind of hinges around Betsy, right? Betsy and her father. Um, Obviously, like everyone else was kind of affected except for Lucy. So in the story about Lucy in all this situation, like the ghost would like help her with things, like she was sick, and then the ghost brought hazelnut to Lucy. I'm not sure how
Okay.
that. I guess old timey medicine.
And
I know that,
fruits.
and fruit. So during one Bible study, the ghost dropped fruits on the people who came over to this haunted house to study the Bible. The ghost came and dropped fruit in their laps. I'm not going to a haunted
That's
house
part
to
of the
read the
apport and
Bible.
disupport stage.
I've always
Yeah.
been
So
told I look like Shaggy, so I'm gonna eat the fruit. I'm gonna eat whatever's in the haunted house. It just like,
row.
whoa, dude, free food, man.
So that's dude. If only Scooby Doo, right? If only there was
Yeah,
a group of teenagers who, with the right hair up their ass, they could have solved this problem. Like
No, because like it seems like the teenagers are the ones that are getting bashed and beaten. So you're gonna have like Shaggy and Scooby getting hit with shovels and shit.
See, we didn't need Scooby Doo and Shaggy because during this time, General Andrew Jackson of the United States military had been hearing about what's going on here at the Bell Manor. And by God, he was going to go solve it himself.
So he showed up with a witch lair, which is like a pseudo exorcist, except for they fight witches.
Yeah.
They also
had to take time. Ghost fighting bullets.
He had to take time out of his schedule of shooting a guy and shooting another guy to go take care of this ghost situation.
We're going to shoot the ghost too, man. Fuck it.
We're talking about Andrew Jackson was told that the War of 1812 was over, and he was like, "Fucking kill the British anyways."
Well, so he showed up, and they had the silver bullets, right? Like, of course, he brought that because that's the most American way to solve any problem. And there was nobody more American than Andrew Jackson at the time.
No.
So, a little insight to that is, I guess, like with werewolves and vampires and I guess now witches, the whole thing about the silver is it traces back to the crucifixion. Apparently, it has to do with the fact that Judas traded 30 pieces of silver for Jesus's incarceration. And I guess for some reason that has some effect on evil spirits. I don't know if it stands for the great sacrifice or whatever, but that's where the silver comes in.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's not enough money for a Messiah. It's just not. 30. I don't know how inflation works dating back to like BCE, but like 30 pittance for Jesus sounds pretty low, dude. Like Judas sucked at negotiate.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of why yeah. Well, let's just move past it. Let's move on from that. General Jackson, right? So he decides with his silver bullets, his witch slayer, and his horse and buggy, he's gonna ride out to the Bell plantation.
Good enough.
And as they are starting to approach, the wagon wheels just lock up, and the horses will go no farther. And he quote unquote says, "By God, by the eternal boys, it's the witch." And a metallic voice was heard in the vegetations, and it said, "All right, General, let the wagon move on, and I will see you again tonight." And the horses began moving yet again.
I'm surprised he didn't shoot the horses.
Right? He was out to shoot everything.
Never shoot
anything and everything.
Probably shot the bushes that were talking to him. Shot the guy that was like, "Hey, did you hear that?" Wow.
No witnesses. It was coming right at us. Now, what was funny about the Andrew Jackson thing? So, the witch lair that he brought, right? So that guy, apparently, so after he shoots at what he thinks is the Bell Witch, the witch like comes up and grabs his nose and like yanks him around the room like it was a sketch comedy, and he goes running away, and Andrew Jackson's just sitting there giggling, and so this guy,
of course he is,
just runs off in the middle of the night.
Hold on. So basically, while this is going on, the witch says, "I'll teach you a lesson," as it appeared to beat the men senseless and led him out the door by his nose.
Man,
this
is so crazy. The witch is just having the best time ever. I'm sorry, say that again, Richard.
The witch liked to say rascal a lot too. Dude, she probably called it a rascal.
This is like the first troll of history ever. This witch thing. It is just having the blast. And the more people come in and getting affected by it is just feeding the energy. It's like a rock concert back in the day. It's some kind of comedy show. This is great.
Oh,
While
I didn't
this is
realize-
going on, Andrew Jackson looks around and says, I never had so much fun in all my life. This beats fighting the British.
He loved fighting the British.
That's such a plantation thing to say.
Oh, man. Man, we haven't even got into the best part about this whole thing yet, because I mean, there's some more I want to cover, but I do want to say that John Bell, we forgot about him. You were talking about the stages of it. You know, he kind of gets an extra stage out of all this when it comes to hauntings and poltergeists, because, I mean, he's considered the first and only death done by the supernatural.
The
He got
only
done-
man to die by ghost.
He got done wrong, man.
Oh yeah, and like if you're spinning the wheel of how to die, that's like the $1 million prize in between two bankrupts.
And
So, yeah,
the thing about it, he knew about it too, because, and I'm just going to give a little before we get into that. Before he actually died, he was riding with a friend or a son-in-law or a brother. I kind of lost that detail. And all of a sudden, his body got taken over and he was contorted into so many different ways. Like all of his joints were moved and just like he was shaken. Okay, I remember now. The other guy was shaken. His son is what it was. His son was convulsing out of control. And John Bell himself was contorted in all these different ways and couldn't move his body on his own free will. It was just like his arms were twisting around, his leg was getting twisted up, and his head was getting twisted around. And when he finally got power over his body again, he turned to who was with him and was like, I don't have very much long left. And from there, it just goes downhill fast.
So his death is interesting. So there's a few different versions of what happened with him, but it all kind of comes back to the same thing. Like, so he gets to the point where he can't breathe, he can't talk. In modern day, you go, okay, this guy's probably got some neurological damage. Things aren't working right. But back in the day, medicine was leeches and arsenic. So
Wow.
there wasn't much going on there. But anyways, the guy dies. And one of the sons goes through the medicine cabinets and he finds a vial. And the vial doesn't look right. And so this is where things get kind of wonky. So like in one of the documentaries and in one of the retellings, like whatever, I think it was Paranormal Scholar, they say that the guy has the doctor come over, he takes a look at it, and then he throws it into the fireplace and it bursts into blue flames.
Oh, wow.
Now, in Williams Bell's version of the story, the doctor looks at it, goes, I didn't give this to him. And
right. That's what I heard.
Takes a needle out, gives it to the cat, and the cat immediately rolls over on its back, legs up in the air, and just dies.
Yep, that's what I heard.
So there's different versions of that. Now, poisoning, and just kind of just looking, there was more than 20 elements that will burn blue. Now, the ones that I found were butane, chlorine, and copper. I know, and copper, copper is what they use in fireworks. So when the fireworks go up, burst blue, that's copper burning. Now, the chlorine side of things, that was kind of interesting. So if this was being given by a doctor, I'm not surprised that one of the few real doctors in rural Tennessee is making somebody drink bleach back in the day, because bleach was
That's
relatively
exactly what
new.
I was thinking. Like
it was an
bleaches
antiseptic.
insides.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Like, were they using it as a topical antiseptic, or were they using it as like, hey, we don't know what the fuck's going on, you're getting haunted, bro?
You mentioned arsenic as a joke a minute ago. Does arsenic burn blue?
No, it does not.
Okay, well,
I don't remember what it was, but I'll look that up real quick while we're
well,
talking.
if he was like perchance given arsenic as a medication, getting back on real science for a second, one of my favorite stories is the 1904 Olympics, which is a fucking funny shit show. If you've never heard about that, it just went real bad for everybody. But the guy that
Which year?
1904, the St. Louis
1904.
Olympics. So, the guy that won, or either he won or he came in third place. He had two guys that were carrying him on his side pretty much, and they were force feeding him arsenic because back in the day it was believed it would be like a stimulant for your muscles. And it really what was going on is it was just causing his legs to go without his control. So I'm wondering if maybe he was given arsenic as a medication and that could have caused his convulsions, which
So
also he probably would have known that, yeah, I don't have much time
I,
left.
I lied there. I wrote down the wrong thing. Arsenic does burn blue,
Really?
and so can aluminum. Aluminum will arc blue. It will have some burning blue to it. That's just
Okay.
the quick Google there. I had it as green, but no, green's pink is potassium. I don't remember what green is, but I remember the Batmobile I was in had green flames, and the guy explained the whole thing to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so arsenic was a common medication, but so was chlorine. And
Mm.
yeah, I'm so glad we got through a lot of that trial and error. Like we're living in a time where a lot of that stuff's not real. So,
Yeah.
yeah, medicine back in the day is it's real scary there. So I know like that was like that's a real possibility. Now that sounds crazy, right? Now you throw it in there and it burns
I
blue.
want
Like
to
what kind
stop
of
you right
asshole does
there
that?
because every 3 months I'm hearing about some medication that caused side effects that people are suing for in class action lawsuits. So have we really moved past that time in America?
No, we haven't. You're absolutely right. Now,
Yeah.
now I will say that we aren't that yes, we are still trying things new, right? However, I don't think that big pharma was out there just mass producing arsenic just for shits and gigs, the way they're kind of doing things now.
Good point.
I will
Right.
say there's a slight difference there. But no, you're absolutely right because I mean, shit, our generation's drug problem stems from fucking wrapping up opium, and the doctors telling us it was cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was 100% wrong on that. Absolutely wrong on the way I just said that. But no one stuck me with a leech, so
Right.
I'm, I stand by my. I'm still happy. I'm not
They're
dealing with
I have
they're
medicine.
never
no
been told that I have too much blood in my body.
yeah, they're no longer trying to balance out your four humors
Yes,
and
right.
they no longer believe that smells are the cause of disease. I think smells bad. You're gonna die, bro.
Aren't any
You got some
spears
smells.
trapped in my spine? They don't need to hit me with a hammer. um, now, depending on this kind of like the death, it can be kind of like a who done it because of this extra poison slash medicine that's there, right? So like, was the doctor being a dick? You know, like was he just having the extra poison there? Yeah. And also, it wasn't very uncommon for women to just poison the shit out of you back in the day. There
We're
Right.
were a lot
talking
of cases
about
like
a
that.
time in the world that a man was buried alive for several days before the insurance company was like, yeah, this seems kind of weird. And, so they dug it up to check out what the cause of death was. And he was alive, very much alive. And he then invented the unburied alive proof casket. So
The
Yeah,
bell.
with the little bell. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fucking terrible, man.
Oh my
Got to
God.
rely on an undertaker. You know what I mean? Like, do you get a refund if you get buried alive? That's bad for business, bro. Um, Now there's also the fact, like, I mean, he was a slave owner. You know,
Right.
Yeah, I
You
very real possibility I'm poisoning you if I'm in their situation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because
there's a lot of
they're
different
doing all the
things.
cooking. I mean, they're doing all the cooking and all that stuff, and they're gonna have access to all. They're probably doing all the chores and things like that. They're gonna have plenty of time to switch out bottles and things like that. That's a good point.
So that after the death, that's when things like it's like the witch is like, "Yo, dude, I did my job. I'm good. I'll be back in 7 years," and just fucks right off.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of that's not necessarily where the
So
story ends, but that's where the main story kind of comes to an end
Yeah.
at.
let's
Yep.
think about this, right? So he first sees it in 1817. It haunts him for 3 years. And that's when he died, apparently, right? 1820.
Yep.
And then 7 years later, it's to return, which would be
Dog ears.
it
Dog
would
man ears.
be 1827. Yep, dog ears. We were back on the every 10 years that end in a 7.
Well,
That's also when John Bell, I'm not sure if they're related or not, but got elected into the Tennessee House of Representatives.
huh.
1827. Boom.
Fantastic.
So there was a lot of like it's such a complex story that there was a lot of like weird stuff that happened in here. Like and it's the retellings are so out there. Like I know there's this one book. The fact that the witch would argue the Bible is probably the funniest thing to me in all this
Right?
situation.
The irony of that. Like, actually, let me tell you how it really is, pal, because I was there, because I'm a demon, but kind of not really.
Yeah. So
it's it's pedantic. It's like me as like a ghost demon thing. Like, I just got to prove my point that you're wrong, mister. And then I'm going to
well,
cripple you.
actually, Matthew says you're fucked up. So
Pretty much. But and
uh,
it doesn't end there either. Like there's still to this day there's things happening in that area. It's no longer in the manor itself. Like it's all confined to a cave, which they think if it's an entity or a creature is where it comes from. I don't know if you like your research got into that, like the Bellwitch Cave itself.
yeah,
I've
so
never
there's the
been there.
cave.
I haven't personally been there. I was too young when we were there, and then my parents were too old. John, you went there, didn't you?
I did go there.
um, People have everybody that goes in there has had some kind of well, not everybody, but they capture stuff on their cameras. They still hear talking to this day. um, they'll be filming and their whole camera battery will be full and it'll die. um,
There
there's
was
been
one lady on the tour that had scratches that went
yeah,
down the side of her neck and onto
there's
her
a
back.
there's a lot of instances of people having scratches. I've watched some recent ghost shows that have all the new technology, like the motion sensors and the SLS cameras. Which, if anybody out there doesn't know what an SLS camera is, it basically is an infrared beam, and anything that looks like it could be like human-like that you can't see, it'll show up like a stick figure. They use a lot of this with the new way of doing CG, and you can tell the difference between a person and then something that's not there making that shape. A lot of that kind of stuff, it's kind of sketchy, and like the people, they have a type of recording device that takes white noise, and supposedly beings can talk through it. Now, I watched the show The Ghost Files, and they're kind of comedians, and a lot of times that thing doesn't know what the hell it's saying. Some of the other ones that I've watched, it'll be like really specific. Like when they went to the Bell Witch Cave, the thing they asked it a question, and it was like, "You need to run now," and it's like, "I am the witch," and I'm just like, "Yeah, okay, come on." But I do know people that have had things happen while they've been there. And what about with you, John? Did you have anything happen when you were there?
On the tour, a lot of the photos that were taken came out kind of weird. There was like a lot of orbs and mist that was in the, but if you think about it, that was in the Polaroid days. So really, I mean, it's not like the cameras were very good back then anyways.
I don't know, because you got pictures from the 1800s that are very clear. Like, I'm wondering what, like, so if it is the cave, what is causing this? Is there a scientific thing to this? I mean, is
So
it? Go ahead.
from what sorry, from what I understand of the cave, so that's where like that really stems from the Native American burial situation, right? Because the cave, it's either below or adjacent to what's considered to be a burial mound.
Mhm.
Uh, Now there is one particular cavern inside the cave that seems to have had some ritual site, whatever that is, burial ritual. I don't know. And that's
Mhm.
where a lot of that, like, that's where that origin comes from of like, okay, is it the cave? Is it this? And that's, if it is this, this is where the haunting's coming from.
Okay, so I'm thinking, so that area was settled by a lot of people. I told you earlier about the Transylvania Company, and they bought that purchase, and it was called the Transylvania Colony. Their main thing was to go out there and search for minerals, mines, precious metals. I'm wondering if it is supernatural and it's dealing with the Native Americans. I'm wondering if it got disturbed by someone going in there and just tearing away and like mining and just stripping away whatever was in there, and this perhaps found this burial site and was like, get rid of these stiffs, Louis, get them out of here. And then from there, this family just moves on here to this property and just further disturbs it, and then it just was like enough, and then still to this day we're dealing with that.
It
So
makes me
I-
think of that movie Poltergeist, where
Yeah.
they threw all the skeletons at that lady in the backyard in that water.
Just random coffins getting shot out of the ground.
Mhm.
Yeah, the house disappears, man. That's, you can't claim that on insurance, man.
No.
Rough day for them. Now, the only thing about, so the Native American thing, like where it's we disturbed a Native American burial ground, and now people are haunted, right? Dude, think about how many roads we've built since World War II. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of motherfuckers
Well,
who
you
should be
you
being
have,
haunted right now.
but you also have ghost sightings and weird things happening on the roads and stuff too. I mean, like one of the common things with the railway is the ghost lantern, which, as most of them have been discredited as just headlights a long distance away to where they both look like one ball of light. But I mean, there are some of them that have been unexplainable. Um, Now, could it be something like, I know a lot of caves have a lot of like energy going on inside of them, like dealing with like what's the word? It's all around the earth, geomagnetic. Maybe something like that's causing all
Ley
these electronic.
lines.
Well, not so much ley lines, but like the Earth's. God, why do I forget the word whenever I need it to matter the most?
Seismatic.
That's good enough, sure. The energy all around. Magnetic field. My God, what is wrong with me? Anyways, like I'm wondering if like magnetic fields could be affecting even to the point where it's causing people to have these hallucinations. Because you remember that one guy that was in the desert that was claiming like he might have found an entrance to Area 51, and he went to walk in that cave, and all of a sudden he started having all that shaking in his body and those weird vibrations. I've heard that there's been instances where people had those same vibrations, and all of a sudden they'd start having hallucinations on top of that, like visual and auditory. So maybe it's just like a geometric thing going on.
Infrasound occurs naturally, and it will cause an uneasy feeling. And also, it causes people while they're sleeping to feel like somebody's in the room with them.
Interesting.
You said that was
So
infrasound?
Yes.
I didn't have enough time or like to look into it, but I was curious because that whole area is littered with caves. In fact, that's one thing a lot of people in that area love to do is just go caving, which is absolutely terrifying to me.
I will never do that again. Never.
Are you talking about going into a cave in general or going into a haunted cave?
I
Yes.
once was in a cave that the opening was only about 14 inches, and 4 inches of that was water. And we were just sliding through on our bellies. And I've seen those people that have been stuck in the
Trapped.
caves. No, thank you.
Yeah,
There's no
Yeah.
that
reason to
seems like a
go
terrible way to die.
underground. Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to look into it. I was going to. I'm curious if maybe they other caves in that area because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of caves. I mean, Mammoth Cave is not very far from this area, maybe like an hour and a half drive. But like, I'm wondering if other caves have had like some kind of geological thing going on as well that could be, and then you could just kind of wrap that around it and be like, okay, this is kind of what's causing this. It's infrasound.
Just
Well,
being in
so
there all together, man, is the dark, the claustrophobia, it's just not good. It's not a good place to be. I'm never going into a cave again.
we're actually going to a cave for our Christmas trip. It's going to be
terrible.
lots of fun. We're going to the Luray Caverns up in Virginia. Now,
Okay.
I do have a question. Maybe you guys know the answer. Maybe you don't. There was the movie The Cave that came out like early 2000s about the women who go into a cave. Do you know, was
That
that
was I thought that was The Descent.
The Descent? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, the wrong movie there in my head. But yeah, that was one of my favorite scary movies.
Oh yeah.
Was that is that in that area?
I don't know. I want to say I think it was
No,
more the mountains.
it was the mountains of North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
Okay, so circle general area mountains. I'm gonna have to watch that movie. And then I know in the Netflix series about Sabrina the Teenage Witch, have you guys seen that at all?
No.
Kinda.
It's definitely darker than the
Oh wait,
Melissa
no.
Joan Hart version
No,
that
that's the
we
one I
had when
was
we were younger.
that's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, no, this one that they have like legit witch shit. It's definitely a teenage show, right? But there's like witch shit going on in there. But it takes place in a coal mine, a coal town in like West
Mhm.
Virginia. I'm guessing some same general region, right? The Appalachia area. And in their cave system, that's where the gateway to hell is.
Mm.
So, dude, caves kind of suck. I think I'm anti cave at this point in my life.
Well, kind of
If
like
we're gonna throw nukes at something, maybe we should attack those
Nuke
fucking
what's the
caves over
name of
there.
that town where the coal mine caught on fire underneath the ground? And
Centralia.
Centralia, yeah, it inspired
Centralia.
Silent Hill.
Yeah.
That's such a fucking
And also,
such a shitty.
if you ever watch the movie Nothing But Trouble, it also inspired Vulcanvania, which I love that movie.
Oh,
That
that's
movie's
Really?
great.
Hmm.
Yeah. But to give like some validity to those ghost hunters, the more recent ones that are using new age technologies that they say that things, talk to them. I mean, that's going back 200 years now that thing has interacted with people. And like I said, I know people that have heard, like, tried to talk to it and have heard voices talk back. Like, it is one of the more interesting ghost stories if we are dealing with a ghost. And who knows, like that whole area, like it's outside of Appalachia, but you got these caves and things like that. Some of this dates back not even prehistory. We're talking about Appalachians go back billions of years. What if there is something that died off, or we thought that it died off, that we don't understand, that lives out there, and it
It's a
just loves
mammoth
to,
ghost.
and it apparently learned English somehow, and it's just trolling us.
I guess we'll just chalk it up to it's an act in nature that we'll never really know the true explanation.
Well, John Bell got the whole. He died for our sins of not our ignorance, the worst way possible.
Tapper. He's just the unlucky bastard who happened to get there. And then poor Betsy.
Either that or medicinal arsenic. We'll never know.
or medicinal arsenic, right? And a very angry teenage daughter who doesn't want to be married off to some weird family.
Oh yeah,
Now,
I didn't know that part. So it was going to be an arranged marriage, kind of.
It was a pushed marriage.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kind of like, you should marry that old, the Gleason boy.
Now, Betsy, you can't wait around forever. You're already 9. Like, you got to settle down sometime.
Jesus
Betsy.
Christ.
You're getting old at this point. That little Joshua boy over there.
I mean, I understand at that day and time when you had 6 to 12 kids, why they were marrying them off that young. Like, get the fuck out of the house. You got 6 more brothers and sisters that I got to take care of. It does make sense to why they married them off so young.
I just had a side note. I just had a thought in my head of Andrew Jackson's horses getting sick, and he has to put them down and shoot them. And he just gets so distraught about having to shoot them that he shoots the guy next to him. No! Bang! What was that? Bang!
He didn't shoot him out of anger. He shot him because he saw him cry. No witnesses.
Goddamn right. That's the most American thing I've ever heard.
I can't understand my emotions, so I respond with bang. It's all I know.
You know how many men I had to kill to get one golden bullet out of their teeth? I'm using this bullet, damn it.
Well, the only way I can possibly take on this ghost in the afterlife is if I have the bullets with me. Wow.
Look, the way I see it, right? So we live in a time where people say that their life is ruined because they have a gluten allergy. And during our grandparents' time, they played dodgeball with real bullets. So
yeah.
I'm just
they also probably died from gluten allergy very young in life because they didn't know what that shit was.
Yeah.
I mean,
they put grain in everything.
In fact, I think Dust Bowl, you don't know you're allergic to peanuts. Peanut butter gets invented. You fucking boom.
Yep, pretty much. They probably, that's probably what happened. Like celiac disease probably caused some kind of reaction, and they were like, I ain't dealing with this. Let's take them out back and shoot them. Different times.
You got to figure. I mean, back then, if you had any type of like mental like disability, you were possessed.
Yeah,
and clearly God hated you.
Mm-hmm.
That was common.
We're gonna
like
pray the devil away.
Even in like the movie rendition, so American Haunting, the first appearance of Kate Batts, she says, "You broke God's law. You and your daughter are going to pay." So,
which that movie, like I was going to mention, we're not going to talk about the darkness that goes into, but that movie has put a stain on the whole lore behind it, and a lot of it was just made up by Hollywood. There's no real truth to it. They just wanted to make it a little more saucy for Hollywood standards for 2005.
Zesty movie.
Yeah. And it hasn't aged well either. And it's just, not only did it like ruin the lore, upset the Bell family, but it just hasn't it's not good. So like, I kind of wish we could just go back and stop that. Like maybe we can channel up Andrew Jackson to shoot the director back in time to stop it from happening.
I think the only good seance is a seance that involves Andrew Jackson coming back and shooting somebody.
I
just
insist,
to give him one
that's
last
the only seance from here on out.
Yeah. Be fueling the whole town's economy. I don't know that area. It's like 2 counties over from where I'm from. It has turned into a little bit of a tourist trap, but I mean, it's stayed consistent the whole entire time. It's been a tourist trap. And I mean, like things like reacting with you and possibly talking to you or appearing when you ask for it to. And this is before they had the technology to fake it. So like if you were to take a trip out there, it's definitely something to go and see. I mean, I grew up hearing that whole story, and it's definitely worth it. I know a lot of people that have had happenings with it, and they've got trolled by this demon dog rabbit themselves. So check it out, people.
That's not too far from Nashville, right?
No,
No, not really.
Okay.
it's halfway between there and Fort Campbell,
Okay.
Yeah.
which was
Now-
our last endeavor.
Fort Campbell, yes. So
The goblins.
the goblins. That's such a fun story. I really enjoyed that
I
one.
know,
That
right?
needs a proper movie.
Yeah.
Now, so we're going to continue our Appalachia trail next week. Is that correct?
Yes.
I know, we're going
You
to.
had a
Oh, are we doing that, or are we going to do the Land Between the Lakes?
The Land Between the Lakes would fit in our Tennessee trifecta.
Yeah,
Okay.
we should go ahead and finish that, and then we can do the missing person stories.
Fun fact, it
that.
also features a dog man.
Dogman.
Oh.
Those motherfuckers.
Did you look up the year for that one to see if it matches the
1985.
Oh,
We're
well.
going back to
year.
the future, boys.
Good year.
We're going back
So
to the future.
So it didn't have the 7 though. That's the reason that I was asking.
That's a werewolf then.
Actually, I just threw that number out because I was
Oh.
thinking about Back to the Future.
You were so confident
gotcha.
about that whole situation.
That's no man, that was a good one. I missed that one.
Listen, guys, in the words of Andrew Jackson, by the Eternals, boys, this podcast is over.
Boom, 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 boom.